around and introduce ourselves. I am Margaret Bolton. I am the productivity coach in our Middletown office, and I've been a realtor in Orange County for 25 years. And I'm really excited to spend the afternoon with you guys and go over one of what I think is the most important aspects of our job is managing our contracts to close process.
Okay.
Hi, I'm
Is there
Holly.
order?
Hello.
Hi, Holly. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm a new agent. I'm with the New City office. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about contracts to close and just get as much information as possible.
Great. Welcome, Holly.
Chanel, you're the next person I can see on my screen.
Hi, I'm Chanel. I'm with the New City office. I also am a new agent. I started about 2 weeks ago. So same like Holly, I'm just trying to learn everything I can.
Great. Awesome.
Go ahead, Nixon.
Okay, cool. My name is Nixon. I'm also a new agent. I've been licensed since December. I'm in the Middletown office. Again, I'm here to learn more about contracts to close.
Sherry, good morning. Good afternoon, rather. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm a new agent as well. I actually got my license in August, but I was still teaching. Prior to real estate, I was a teacher. So now I'm really transitioning and I want to be a full-time real estate agent. So I still consider myself a new agent just because I haven't had that many closings. So I'm here just to learn as much as I can.
Great. And Ingrid, I saw you just came on. How are you?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, so we can get started.
Okay, great. So today's focus is negotiating contracts, which since we don't draw them, we really don't do. That's what the attorneys do in our area. We're going to focus heavily on transaction management from accepted offer through contract to closing. Managing our vendors. Our vendors are everyone from the attorneys, home inspectors, lenders, insurance providers, and compliance and risk management. The agenda for this session is going to be to build out buyer and seller timelines, best practices for managing the deal, command transaction management, and recap and create our success list. After this section, we'll be able to develop an understanding of the steps necessary after a contract is signed, where a deal can fall apart, and how to avoid that, and how to use command to help us get the deal to the closing table. For a lot of us, you know, it's a big event to get a client, first off, when we're brand new. Then we're out doing the deal, whether it's a listing or a buyer, we get the accepted offer, and that's a great reason to celebrate, but we're not at the finish line yet. Contract to close is so super important. We don't get paid until we close, so we don't stop at the accepted offer. We stay engaged through the process to make sure all of the vendors in the transaction are keeping to their timelines. And the other big side of it is keeping our clients calm, rest assured, and alleviating stress, because their stress is at an all-time high when they're going through this process. And we don't want to leave them dangling, because if we're not in contact and we're not staying in touch and following the transaction, and they're not hearing from us and they don't know what's happening, all sorts of stuff starts to go wrong. Every area geographically, real estate is done a little bit differently. So we're going to work on what's in our Rockland, Orange, Sullivan, Ulster, Columbia Green, Dutchess County areas. So we'll start our focus with the buyer timeline. And once the offer is accepted, ours is a little bit different than what you're seeing on the PowerPoint. We go from accepted offer to home inspection and then contract, because we are an attorney state. And in our area right now, the brokers do not draw contracts. A little bit further north of us, they do. But for us, it's accepted offer, home inspection, and then contract. So a little bit of change to what you're seeing on the screen. So throughout this process, we're working with the lender
I
to
don't
make
see
sure.
anything on the screen. Sorry for interrupting.
You're not seeing my screen? Is anybody seeing the screen?
No, I only see
No.
Zoom 5.0 is here.
Same here. We're not seeing anything on the screen, Ann.
Let me stop sharing and reshare. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why that happened.
No worries. Can you just go over the timeline one more time, Ann Margaret? I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. So we're starting with a buyer timeline. And what we're working with is you've already taken the buyer out, shown them homes, they've settled on a home, and they've made an offer. They've negotiated and their offer has been accepted. So our area differs a little bit from the timeline that you're seeing. The home inspection is actually before they execute the formal contract with the attorneys. So it's called contract to close, but we're going to start from accepted offer. And once the offer is accepted, the buyer generally has 7 to 10 days to schedule their home inspection. They schedule their home inspection. You recommend home inspectors, and it's always good practice to recommend at least 3 or more, never just 1. That's kind of a compliance issue. So, and they're always welcome to choose their own home inspector. Generally, without COVID, we accompany the home inspector and always advise our clients that they should be at the home inspection. They're paying for it. It's an educational opportunity, and it's a lot easier for them to hear directly from the home inspector than for them to rely on the written report or your observations. That's another liability and compliance issue. During COVID, we're not allowed to go on the inspection. Only the inspector is allowed in the home. So that changes things a little bit. And all conversation about the inspection in that aspect should be between the buyer and the home inspector. We don't want to get the rundown from the home inspector and have the liability and responsibility of interpreting it for the buyer. Any questions? Okay.
How many days did you say the inspection should be scheduled after the offer?
It's generally 7 to 10 business days. In writing up an offer, when I'm representing a buyer, I generally put 7 business days. If you run into scheduling issues, you know, we're in the midst of a very busy buyer market. Inspectors are booked up. And For some buyers, they can, well, they can't come right now. So, you just got to do the best that you can. And you also work with the listing agent to keep them informed if it goes over the period and it's a scheduling issue. Get in contact with the listing agent and see if the seller is in agreement to extend the time period. If they're not, you may have to encourage the buyer to move to a different home inspector. On the selling side, you really want that inspection period as short as possible and to not drag it out. So once the inspection is completed, generally what we like to do is give the buyer 24 hours or so once they receive the report so that they can review it. And I'll say something like, I see that you've received your inspection report, let's talk tomorrow and go over any issues that you might have. And then the conversation on that day goes, are you satisfied with your inspection? Are you ready to move forward to contract? If they bring up any issues, you're then going to work through those issues. Hopefully the home inspector has either shared the full report or at minimum a summary page with you. You'll review the issues with your buyer. Any questions that you don't understand, you should call the home inspector and ask him to further explain what he saw, how can it be corrected. Some inspectors will give a price estimate, most will not. They'll just bring the issue, hopefully give a resolution, and sometimes they don't even do that. You then would negotiate any repair items or any concerns of the buyer with the seller. If you're on the seller end, you want to keep the buyer's agent to a tight timeline on getting back to you after the inspection is completed. And generally the reports are back to the buyer within 24 to 48 hours. However, if they're doing a radon test and water tests, those could add a few more days. And I don't like to start negotiating until all tests are back. Any questions?
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay.
What happens if we're signing contract, but we're still waiting for, let's say, the radon test, and that could take a few days? We have all the other tests back. So what happens then?
Then the contract would have to be subject to the radon test results.
Okay.
But generally we wait for all results before the listing agent will send the information to the attorneys to draw contracts.
Okay, so, alrighty.
If, you may run into a situation where a buyer or seller wants contracts before inspection. It's very, very common in foreclosure and REO sales that the contract will come before the inspection. That's kind of a whole nother can of worms, but just so you're aware, if you do sell a foreclosure, REO, bank-owned property, they will generally want the contract first and then the inspection later. Those sellers generally almost always don't renegotiate on the inspection, but the buyer does have the option to walk away from the transaction.
How many times can a house be inspected?
As many as it takes. Or do you mean how many times can one buyer have the house inspected?
Yeah, how many times one buyer can have the house inspected? Like, let's say that the inspector came in and there was a few issues with the house. In that contract, the seller agrees to, hey, I'm going to fix those stuff. So would it be smart for us to go back and double check to make sure those stuff are fixed?
Yes. And depending on what the items are, if they're minor, as the agent, you can make an appointment to go back with your buyer and make sure they're fixed. Or if there's something major, then you would have, ask the inspector to come back.
So now, who would cover that cost? Would it be us, or would it be the seller who would cover that inspector cost?
The callback call generally would be the buyer's expense if the home inspector charges it. It's not very common that the home inspector has to go back. It's generally something that as the buyer's agent or the buyer can inspect themselves and see that it's done. I haven't had many where the home inspector have to go back. It's generally on me, the buyer's agent, or making an appointment for the buyer to go see. And a lot of times we don't even make that appointment. It's usually understood that any repairs that have to be done will be done before closing, and the buyer would see that at the walkthrough. And most sellers don't do the repairs until after the buyer has received a mortgage commitment. So the repairs become a condition of the contract. The contract is subject to those repairs being done. And generally it's at the walkthrough or maybe the appraisal that we see that they're done. But generally it's not going to be the appraisal because they won't have commitment. If they're costly, sellers will wait. And if you're representing the seller, you always want to advise your seller to not do the repairs until the buyer has commitment. Because the repairs from one inspection for that buyer are going to almost always be different than the repairs if that deal falls apart because that buyer couldn't get the mortgage and you have to put that property back on the market. The next home inspection could find completely different things. And that buyer may have totally different concerns than the first buyer. So any negotiated repairs are done after mortgage commitment.
The only other question we have is if radon is required or radon test.
Radon is not required. It's not a requirement of the state or of any mortgage lenders that I am currently aware of. It's the buyer's choice if they want to do a radon test. And if radon is found over the EPA limit, which is 4 picoliters per 1,000, I think. Again, the seller is not required to put in a system or give a credit for a system. However, most do because it is a health and safety item, but it's not required that they do so. It's up, it's up to the buyer. Some buyers are concerned about it, some are not, and generally the sellers have been living there for 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years and, never checked it. Any other questions about radon? Do you all understand what radon is? Okay. So once the inspection is cleared and everyone is satisfied and ready to move to contract, as a buyer or a seller's agent, you're responsible for getting all of the details of the transaction over to your client's attorney. I like to do it by a certain form that I use, which I'm happy to share with all of you. If you just put your contact information in the chat, I can email that to you after the class. I have a couple of checklists and basically what I include for contract information. And that's basically just the details of the deal off of the purchase offer. What we've negotiated, what we've agreed to, what the timeline is, are there any repairs from the inspection and so forth. So the attorney knows to put that stuff into the contract. Along with that information, it's always nice to provide the attorney you're working with as much information as you can about the property. A tax record, a tax map, if if you've been provided a survey of the property, that's always helpful to include. A copy of their pre-approval is good. Anything that can help the attorney draw the contract and be informed about the deal. I use a separate form versus the purchase offer. I always include the purchase offer, but sometimes the purchase offers get a little blurry, a little messy, because they've been passed around numerous times. So once you get to that point, you've sent the attorney everything, that's when they start to draw the contracts. The contracts are drawn by the seller's attorney, are then sent over to the buyer's attorney, and the buyers go in first, review the contract with their attorney and sign, make their down payment. That is all then sent over back to the seller's attorney. Buyer and seller attorneys negotiate usually a rider, which is anything outside of the contract, repairs, and so forth. Once they agree on the rider, the seller then will go in and will sign the contract. Once that happens, you now have a fully executed contract. You are then required to report that to MLS within 24 hours if you're the listing agent. And also, I always request a copy from the attorneys and ask them to update me by email. In a perfect world, that would happen, but more likely than not, they don't. So then it's our job to stay in touch with them and follow up on who signed, when they signed, when they're executed. And I also have a letter that I'm happy to share with you, how I try and get more cooperation with the attorneys. And once you do get a fully executed contract, the attorney should be sending it to the lender, but they don't always. So I like to get a copy and send it to the lender. Hopefully it's, might save a couple of days off of the attorney doing it. Once the lender receives the contract, that's usually when the appraisal is ordered. That's not here on this timeline, but I would make a note to add it to your timeline. Is generally the appraiser would call you as the buyer's agent to set that up, and you would normally accompany the appraiser and provide them an appraiser package, which would include a copy of the listing, a copy of the purchase offer or contract, and any comparable sales to support the offer that's been accepted. Some appraisers will accept your package and some will not, but it's always great to have and provide to them. In our COVID environment, we're not a company appraisers. They're going on their own, or they're doing drive-by appraisals and computer automated valuations. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So normally the buyer agent would attend the appraisal?
Yes.
Okay, but the buyer does not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So once we're at that point and the appraisal has been completed, if the appraisal comes in at the value or higher, we're good to go. If it comes in lower, then you may have to negotiate once again with the buyer and seller. In a situation where the appraisal comes in lower, you can speak to the lender, that would be the loan originator. As the buyer's agent, you would be doing that, and see if they can challenge the appraisal. If you can provide comparable sales that support your offer price, they may be able to challenge it. If a challenge is not successful, it's then up to the buyer and seller to negotiate. Will the seller come down to appraised value, or is the buyer going to come out of pocket with more money to make up the difference? With the current market that we're seeing ourselves in, where prices are escalating, appraisal issues are going to become more commonplace. So it's good to be aware of when you're listing property that you have sufficient comps, and when you're selling the property that there's also comps, but you're also going to have to allow for increase to your market analysis for buyers and sellers. You're going to have to allow for increases in the market. So it's going to be also important to pay attention to stats in the MLS, how prices are increasing.
I have another question.
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem.
Will the buyer's agent get a copy of the appraisal?
Generally not, unless there's a problem.
Okay.
The buyers have a right to the appraisal because they are the ones paying for it. Many banks are giving them today. They used to rarely give it, but your buyer does have the right to ask for a copy. So once the appraisal comes back, clears any hurdles, everything is good, the mortgage goes into processing. At the same time as the contracts are signed, there's also title insurance to be ordered and municipal searches. Again, they're not here in this timeline. Once you have the fully executed contract, you should also check in with the attorney for the buyer, if you're the buyer's agent, and ask that title and municipals have been ordered. They generally take between 2 and 8 weeks, so it's important that they get ordered as soon as possible. Do you all understand what title and municipals mean? Or should I explain a little further?
Yes, please. And Mark.
Okay, great. So whenever a home is being sold, in order to protect the buyer and the lender, because they're both on the line, the title to the property gets searched, sometimes called an abstract of title, and they trace back the title as far as they can in the county records to make sure that each consecutive time the title was transferred, it was done legally, and that there is no one else that can make a claim to ownership in the property. The municipal search also gets ordered at the same time, generally through the title company. And the municipal search is a search of the town or city's records, that there are no open building code violations on the property. That's also something when you list a property, you should look into and deal with it before you get to accepted offer rather than later. So in the timeline, we have the contract executed, the appraisal is ordered, comes in, title is being ordered, and while title and mortgage get processed, there's a bit of a lull in the action. It's good practice once a week to check in with the lender and make sure that everything is on track and that any additional paperwork they're requesting, the buyer is providing. And it's also good to let your buyer know that this is going to be a stressful time for them and that their lender is probably going to ask them for stuff they've already given. So whatever they give the lender, keep copies, keep it on their computer, keep it handy, and just send it off if they ask for numerous times. The buyers will also need home insurance or hazard insurance. Again, you can recommend 2 or more insurance companies for your buyers if they don't already have a relationship with one. They'll need that in place before they can close. And with some lenders, they'll need that in place before they can get commitment.
Is home insurance and hazard insurance the same thing? Like, does
It is.
Okay, perfect.
Yep,
Yeah.
great question. Thank you. A home warranty is optional. Sometimes the seller will include it as a bonus. We don't see that too much. It's a good practice representing the buyer to offer them a warranty for liability reasons. And if they're new first-time buyers, they're going to be strapped on cash. Home warranties cover major appliances and systems of the home.
How much is that roughly?
Generally about $400 to $1,000 depending on the company, and it's generally good for 1 year.
Thank you.
Sure. Any questions? I kind of did the buyer and seller timeline a little bit combined, but any questions on the buyer timeline?
No.
Great. Okay. So on the seller side, you have the accepted offer, the inspection. For our sellers, we always want the inspection as quick as possible. Stay on the buyer's agent to make sure they're getting it scheduled within the agreed upon time frame. Then we have contract. Then after contract comes the appraisal, and this is a little bit light, but the same things are in line. So if you're on the seller side, you want to be checking in with the buyer's agent. Has the appraisal been ordered? First, has the bank received contracts? Has the appraisal been ordered? Has it come in at value? Are we good on the appraisal? Have title and municipal searches been ordered? Staying involved with the transaction with all of the vendors and then keeping your buyer or seller updated is crucial. If your buyer and seller aren't hearing from you, they fear the worst and they're already at an all-time stress level. So the more you can keep them updated, the greater the experience for all of you. Have any of you purchased a home
Yes.
and gone through the process?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Would you like to share how you felt during the process?
It was actually very smooth sailing for me just because our lender and the agent that we were working with were really diligent, and we closed in like 2 months, which was really amazing. So for us, it was great because we had all the paperwork ready that was requested. So it was pretty easy.
Awesome. And have you recommended or referred any of the parties that you used, business or friends or family?
I'm a new agent, so I don't have anything yet, but yes, I would definitely recommend everybody that I used.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share their experience? Because that's a great experience, but not always the norm.
So that was the question that I had with COVID-19. How has that affected the whole closing and the closing process? Has it taken longer than people say 3 months normally to close, and usually it doesn't even take that fast?
It really depends on all the vendors involved. Some banks are moving quicker than others. Some attorneys are moving quicker than others. Personally, I'm seeing it take a little bit longer. We have a lot of people working at home, so I think it's taking longer to get things done.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else want to share an experience buying or selling a home? Erin, I'm on slide 8 because I think we covered 6 and 7.
Yeah, I'm on best practices for managing the deal and risk
Okay.
avoidance.
Okay, great. So now that we have somewhat of a detailed picture of what needs to happen and when, you need to know when the deal is vulnerable and how to protect it to get to the closing table. You know, we feel like the hard work is up until the accepted offer for many of us, and we can sit back and wait until the closing happens and collect our check. But many deals can fall apart from that point of accepted offer to closing. So staying involved, knowing what's going on, keeping our clients updated gives us that much more chance of heading off an issue before it becomes a huge full-blown problem and deals fall apart. I can think of many deals that I've experienced where that has happened, and it's generally when some part of the puzzle wasn't followed through and seen all the way through. Time is always a factor. If you're not hearing from people on any side or point of the transaction, a lot of times it's a good red flag that there's an issue going on, and probe a little bit deeper. So the deals are at risk of falling apart generally at all the negotiation points, from the inspection to the contract. An important thing to bring up there is generally we negotiate the inspection items before contract. And then many times the attorneys ask again, were there any issues with the inspection? And sometimes they may not have gotten brought up when we negotiated the inspection, and they'll get brought up again at contract. So good preparation, sending the information to the attorney and connecting with them and saying, hey, we've negotiated the inspection items. Here's what was of concern. If anything else comes up, please let's discuss. Having deadlines, 7 to 10 days for inspections, putting, deadlines in for contracts to be signed. And because we have to work together with the attorneys, we're kind of at their mercy. So I always like to put deadlines, or I really don't like the word deadline, but I like the word time frame, is I will put them in my offers, but we can't always guarantee that the attorneys are going to adhere to our timelines, but we can always try. And it's a best practice to do. Does anyone have any other ideas of where a deal might be at risk of falling apart that you want to discuss some more? Okay, we'll move on to your co-broker relationship. This is something that I've always taken very seriously in my time in the business, and started out from day one. It may just be my personality. I like to get along with everybody. Is really going above and beyond to win over your co-brokers and build those relationships. It helps in many ways. It helps the deals close smoother when issues arrive. When you're on good terms with one another, it's easier to negotiate and get the deals done for your clients. It's also a great benefit, and the market that we're in now, I'm sure you're all hearing about the multiple offer situations. Listing agents want to work with agents that they know, like, and trust. If they know you're a good agent and you stay on top of your transactions and you're easy and cooperative to work with, if all things are equal, that could be what seals the deal to your buyer getting the house. So you always want to treat your co-broker agents with respect, you know, just getting to know them a little bit. And some are going to be easier than others. Some are going to be difficult. But it's always great, even in the face of adversity, if they're being difficult to deal with, kill them with kindness. Any questions, insights, ahas? Okay, getting repeat business and referrals. When your clients are satisfied, they may recommend you. When they're wowed, they're definitely going to recommend you. So using the KW app, are you all familiar with the consumer app?
Yes.
Okay. And you understand that the guides that are in there, and it's kind of like the Domino's pizza timeline? So it's a tool that can help you keep the client updated versus having to call them all the time. You can update them right through the app. And we'll get into that in a little bit. It's great to create vendor and utility lists. Lenders, attorneys, insurance providers, home inspectors, everything and anything that they will need, and providing that to them. Utilities, generally, there's only one option, maybe two. Other vendors always give more than two, and try to build your relationships with your vendor list. Having vendors that you can trust throughout the transaction and that you know are going to go above and beyond to make the deal close are the ones you want to work. It's also great practice if it's in your business plan to give closing gifts, to plan ahead for that.
What do you normally give as a closing gift to your clients?
You know, it kind of depends on the client. I've done all different things over the years. If money is tight and limited, you know, sometimes there's like some fancy folders that they can keep all their closing paperwork in, and it's usually branded to you. So whenever they have a question, want to look at their survey, want to look at something, they pull that out, or they get a repair done to the house, they put their receipts in there, and those are pretty inexpensive closing gifts. I've done gift certificates to a local restaurant for their moving day. I've done out to dinner gift certificates, Home Depot, Lowe's gift certificates, Cutco knives, which are pretty cool because they have staying power and they can be imprinted with your name and address, and your slogan and your company, and you can deduct the full cost because they then become advertising. For most closing gifts that are all of the other variety, the IRS only allows you to deduct $25. And generally, if you're giving a restaurant or Home Depot gift certificate, you're going to spend more than $25. So if you do things like knives, cutting boards, anything that can be personalized with your logo, you can then write it off as advertising and give a little higher quality gift and get the deduction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I put the name of our co-rep in the chat if anybody was interested. We have a rep that we work with that gives us great deals on the Cutco knives.
So the vendor list should generally be provided to your buyer once you've done your buyer consultation and they've signed the exclusive right to represent agreement is when I would provide them with the vendor list, or while they're getting pre-approved. If they're getting pre-approved first, give it to them right away. If you're doing the consultation and then they're going out to get approved, give them the vendor list at that time. The utility list, you generally want to provide usually after contracts are signed. That way, when they get to closing, they know who to call for gas, electric, cable, and so forth. So going through the contract to close process, there's a lot of tasks to keep track of in the transaction management process. So setting up custom to-do lists for yourself and customizing your consumer guides in Command will help make sure you don't miss a step and that you keep your client informed at every step. Have you all been into Command and playing around a little bit?
Yes.
A little.
Okay, are you familiar with the Opportunities tab and how to set up an opportunity?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So when you go into opportunities and you get to under contract stage, you can go in and you can edit it and you can put a customized checklist for what we do in our area. And again, it's kind of in the package that I can send you all of Word documents. You can take right from the Word doc and you help use it to customize your Command opportunity. Also in Command, you'll find under the Consumer tab down on the bottom, you'll find the Guide Builder, which will allow you to set up the buyer's guide and seller's guide to customize for how business is done in our area and how you like it to be done. So I highly suggest that you take the checklists for buyers and sellers, go in there and customize it right away as soon as you can. Don't leave it with just what's in there. Go in and customize it for your business plan, and how we do business in our market area. Any questions on that? Have you all been using the app and sharing it with any clients?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. And are you finding that you're getting engagement that you can view on Command, what they're looking at and so forth?
Yeah, simple to use. It's not that difficult.
Awesome. And are your clients that you're using it with enjoying it?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, they're enjoying it. They, like I said before, it's easy to navigate, so it's pretty much a win for them as well.
Cool.
The beauty of the mobile app is that it's connected to Command. So when you have a client who is saving properties or making any sort of a collection for themselves, you can see right in your database what they are sharing, what they're favoriting, what they maybe are sharing with their spouse. And it really keeps you up on exactly what they're looking for. And because it's connected, it has a big ease of use.
Great. So it's kind of bringing us to our end of our section. Anyone want to share how they're thinking, how they feel, what actions they plan to take moving forward after today's session?
Yeah, this is very helpful. I feel like this whole process is usually very difficult, and even no matter how much you prepare for it, it could go any way. So I think you gave a lot of helpful tips, and I thought it was interesting about the closing gifts. Thank you for telling us to put it as advertisement. That'll definitely help us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Anybody want to share anything?
I just want to say thank you for going step by step with both of the timelines. I think it really helped me just to get a better view of an overall view of each step during the process. And I thank you for answering any questions about COVID too, because I think that's where I get really confused. As a new agent, I get hesitant, like, oh, should I be there at the appraisal? Should I do this? Like, it's like a difficult time to be a new agent just because there's so many changes. So thank you so much for really taking some time and going through each step. I really appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome. I really enjoyed helping you today, and I'll send you out those documents. And thanks so much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye everyone.
Have a good day.